Welcome to the Sleepy Historian. When you hear the British Empire, what comes to mind? Perhaps red-coated soldiers, magnificent palaces, and those pink-colored regions covering a quarter of the world's map. Maybe afternoon tea, gentlemanly manners, and the royal family. But here's a fact that might surprise you. The people who built this vast empire didn't start out with a powerful army, a wealthy treasury, or even a favorable geography. On the contrary, England was a small, rainy island with limited resources. So how did this little island manage to create an empire on which the sun never set? From the Indian subcontinent to Canada, from Australia to the Caribbean, how did they reach every corner of the globe? And perhaps most importantly, how did they manage to maintain this dominance for centuries? Tonight, we'll leave the legends behind and uncover the truth. You'll witness a story of chance discoveries, strategic brilliance, and sometimes ruthless decisions. We'll move away from royal palaces and step into the world of ordinary people. The merchants, sailors, and migrants who truly built this empire. But before we begin, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It's a great way to support what I do, and it truly means a lot to me. I'd also love to know where in the world you're watching from, and what time it is there. Share it in the comments. Now, get comfortable. Let the noise of the modern world fade away, and together, let's journey back to the age of sailing ships, gunpowder, and the birth of a global empire. Our story doesn't begin with an empire. It begins with an ordinary island. Let's imagine that you're one of its inhabitants. It's the mid-1500s. And your world is this small piece of land surrounded by the cold, stormy waters of the Atlantic Ocean. You're in England, and it's truly a small place. You wake up early in the morning. Outside, as usual, it's drizzling. England's climate is far from being an agricultural paradise. Summers are cool, winters are wet and windy. The soil is fertile, but the harvest is just enough to feed the population, never enough to create wealth. Your home is a modest stone or wooden cottage. Most people live in villages. Even London, at that time, is a small city of only about 50,000 people, with narrow and filthy streets. For comparison, Istanbul has a population of 500,000, and Beijing nearly 1 million. You look at the map of the world. On the edge of Europe, an island nation. To the east stretches the vast Ottoman Empire, controlling the Silk Road. Silk, spices, porcelain. All the valuable goods are in their hands. To the south, Spain and Portugal are bringing shiploads of gold and treasure from the New World. France is large, powerful, and always a threat. And you? You're on a small island, on the sidelines of the great game. But you do have one thing: water, the ocean. And as the saying goes, necessity is the mother of invention. England's future lies in those waters. You walk down to the shore, a small fishing village. The boats rock in the waves. They're small, wooden, but remarkably sturdy. English sailors have battled these harsh seas for centuries. The storms of the North Sea, the waves of the Atlantic, these waters show no mercy to weak seamen. One of the sailors, an old fisherman, speaks to you. "Son," he says, eyes fixed on the horizon, "this island's land is small, but the sea is endless. Our future is out there, beyond that horizon. At the time, no one realizes it yet. But those words are a prophecy, because England's greatest strength will be born from its weaknesses. Their lack of power on land will force them to turn to the sea. And on the sea, they will find a power no one could have imagined. It's the mid-1500s. The Spanish and the Portuguese are dividing the world. A line drawn by the Pope splits it in two, west to Spain, east to Portugal. And the English? They weren't invited. No one wants them involved. But here, a famous English trait begins to emerge: stubbornness. When the English don't like the rules, they don't try to change them. They simply ignore them. And so, a new profession is born: piracy, or rather, pardon, privateering. What's the difference? A piece of paper. Officially, it's a license from the Queen of England. Queen Elizabeth Thurs is a clever woman. Her treasury is empty, but her enemies are rich. The Spanish ships are hauling tons of silver and gold from the New World. Elizabeth's plan is simple, yet brilliant. I can't afford to declare war on Spain. But if you, on your own, happen to attack and plunder their ships, I'll look the other way. In fact, I'll applaud you. And so men like Francis Drake step onto the stage. Francis Drake, the rise of a pirate. Now imagine you are Francis Drake. You come from a modest family of traders. You're not noble. You have no place in the royal court. But you do have a ship and endless courage. It's 1577. You've received a secret mission from the Queen herself. Sail around the world, raid Spanish ships, and come back alive. You board your ship with a crew of 90 men. Your vessel, the Golden Hindi, is small but fast. You cross the Atlantic, navigate through the Magellan Strait, and reach the Pacific Ocean. No one expects you, because no one believes an English ship could ever make it this far. The Pacific coast of South America. Spanish colonies. Ships filled with gold. No protection, because they think there are no enemies here. They're wrong. You capture a Spanish treasure ship, the Cacafuego. It carries 27 tons of silver, precious jewels, and gold. More wealth than England's annual budget. Then you keep sailing. You cross the Pacific, reach Indonesia, load up on spices, cross the Indian Ocean, round the Cape of Good Hope. And in 1580, 3 years later, you return to England. You've become the second captain in history to circumnavigate the globe, but the first Englishman to do it. Your ship's hold is so full that even the crew's share of the loot makes each of them rich. The Queen's share pays off all royal debts, and there, aboard your ship, Queen Elizabeth knights you herself. Sir Francis Drake, a pirate, now a hero. The Spanish are furious, but there's nothing they can do. The message is clear. The English are now on the seas, and stopping them won't be easy. 1588. King Philip II of Spain has had enough. For years, English pirates have been plundering his ships. Queen Elizabeth has become a threat to Catholic Europe. The time has come to put an end to it. Philip prepares the largest fleet the world has ever seen. The Spanish Armada. Such ships, 30,000 soldiers, massive galleons, floating fortresses of wood and cannon. The plan is simple. Invade England, dethrone Elizabeth, and restore the Catholic order. Now imagine you are an ordinary citizen on that small English island. The news spreads. The Spanish are coming. A giant fleet is advancing toward the English Channel. You go down to the shore. The people have gathered. Everyone stares at the horizon, and then you see it. Hundreds of sails in the distance. So many that the sea itself seems covered by them. Fear spreads. How could you possibly fight such power? But the English Navy has a different plan. Their ships are smaller, but much faster than anyone expects, and they know something the Spanish don't. These are their waters. English captains circle around the Spanish ships, closing in, firing, pulling away. The Spanish are too slow to keep up. They can't catch them. Then the English reveal their genius. They take old, empty ships, fill them with gunpowder and flammable materials, and set them on fire. In the darkness of night, they release these fire ships toward the Spanish fleet. Panic breaks out among the Spanish captains. Their ships crash into each other. Formation collapses. And then, the famous storms of the English Channel strike. Spanish ships are torn apart by the fierce winds. Some sink, others are smashed against the Scottish coast. The Spanish Armada loses nearly half its fleet on the journey home, one of the greatest naval disasters in history. England stands. And now, the world knows, this small island is unbeatable at sea. The strategy of sea dominance after the defeat of the Armada. One truth becomes clear. Whoever controls the sea controls the world. England begins to build a systematic naval power. Not just ships, but a philosophy, a national strategy. Step 1. Professionalize the Navy. No more dependence on pirates. England now needs a regular Royal Navy. Ships become larger, faster, and armed with more powerful guns. Step 2. Maritime trade. England establishes massive trading companies like the East India Company. These aren't just merchants. They have their own armies, their own fleets, half private, half state-run institutions. Step 3. Naval bases. Build strongholds in strategic parts of the world. Gibraltar, Malta, Singapore, Cape Town. These bases give English ships a safe harbor and supply station wherever they go. The result? By the end of the 18th century, the British Navy is the most powerful maritime force on Earth. And during the Napoleonic Wars at Trafalgar, that power reaches its peak. The birth of the East India Company. The year is 1600. Queen Elizabeth signs a document, the Charter for the East India Company. On paper, it's just a trading company. In practice, an empire within an empire. Imagine this. You're a young employee of the company. You've boarded a ship departing from London, and after a grueling 6-month voyage, you finally reach India. Now, lift your gaze ahead. Can you see Calcutta? Along the banks of the Hooghly River, the docks, the warehouses, the fluttering flags. Under the British flag, a trading post, but it's also a fortress, with walls, cannons, and soldiers. Working for the company in 18th century England is a privilege. If you're young, ambitious, and lucky, you can rise, even from an ordinary family, and make a fortune here. Your first assignment: accounting. You're working through the company's ledgers. What's being traded? Spices, tea, silk, cotton. At what prices? On which ships? But soon you realize this is more than trade. How does a company rule a country? The East India Company first arrived merely to buy spices, but India at that time wasn't a unified nation. The Mughal Empire was collapsing. Hundreds of small principalities were fighting each other. The company played it smart. It sided with one prince, lending him soldiers in exchange for trade privileges. Then it fought against another. It won. Now, it controlled 2 territories instead of 1, and it went on like that. 57. The Battle of Plassey. Under the command of Robert Clive, the company's private army defeated the Nawab of Bengal. They were no longer just merchants. They were landlords. They collected taxes. They administered justice. A company was now ruling a country. You, sitting at that accounting desk, you're seeing the money flow in. The wealth of Bengal is being funneled to London. The company's shares are skyrocketing. And you get promoted, now you're in a higher position. But you also see another truth. This wealth comes at a cost. Todi. Famine. Exploitation. Local weaving industries destroyed. Because Britain wants to sell its own textiles, famines sweep across. Bengal millions die of hunger. One evening, you dine with a senior company official. He explains it to you calmly. Young man, our business is profit. Sentimentality has no place in commerce. We are here to make money. The welfare of the local population is not our responsibility. And there you have it, the true face of the British Empire: pragmatic, ruthless, efficient. 1620, the Mayflower. 02 settlers arrive on the shores of America. These are the Pilgrims. They faced religious persecution in England. They crossed the seas seeking a new life. But they are only the beginning. Throughout the century, hundreds of thousands of English, Scots, and Irish crossed the Atlantic. North America, Australia, South Africa, New Zealand. Why? Because land in England is scarce. Unemployment is high. The New World offers new opportunities. Imagine, you are the child of a farming family who emigrated to Virginia in the 1750s. You've endured a dreadful 2-month voyage across the Atlantic. Storms, cramped cabins, disease, and poor food. But finally, you see land. The coast of Virginia. Forests, rivers, endless land. You're granted a plot, 40 acres. Land you could never have owned in England. Here, it's yours. The first year is brutal. You clear the forest, plant the soil. You meet local Native American tribes, some friendly, some hostile, but you survive. You plant tobacco. Your first harvest. You send your crops to England, and you make money. 5 years later, You have a modest but comfortable farm, a house, a barn, wide fields. Your children are growing up free. This is the power of English expansion. Not just conquest, but settlement. The English don't just plant a flag where they go. They build homes, bring families. They create villages, towns, cities, different models of colonization. The Spanish came to the New World for gold. They took it and left. They enslaved native peoples, emptied the lands of their treasures. The English did something different. They settled. In North America, they established 13 colonies, each with its own parliament, its own laws. They were loyal to the English crown, yes, but largely self-governing. The first to go to Australia were prisoners. England's prisons were overcrowded. The solution? Send them to the other side of the world. Starting in 1788, thousands of convicts were transported to Australia. But something remarkable happened. Once they served their sentences, many stayed. They were given land. They built farms. The penal colony became a settler colony. In South Africa, the English took Cape Town from the Dutch, a crucial port on the route to the Indian Ocean. Whoever controls the Cape controls Eastern trade. In New Zealand, the British signed treaties with the Maori people, the Treaty of Waitangi. On paper, equality. In practice, as English settlers arrived, the Maori lost their lands. Everywhere, the same pattern. First trade, then settlement, then dominance. 1760s, Northern England, a small village, a place with no fame or fortune. But here, something is happening that will change history forever. A craftsman invents a new machine, a weaving loom. Once, a single worker could weave maybe 1 meter of fabric per day. Now, with this machine, that same worker can produce 10. This is the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Imagine yourself now. You're a worker in a textile factory in Manchester. You start work at 6 a.m., you finish at 7 p.m. all day, surrounded by noise, smoke, and endless machines. The conditions are terrible. The air is thick and dirty. Wages are low. But this system, this grueling, relentless system, is turning England into the most powerful economy in the world. Because now, England is the world's factory. Textiles, iron, steel, ships, railways. Everything is made here. And you begin to realize something. The Industrial Revolution isn't just an economic change. It's a military revolution. Steam power and global dominance. Robert Fulton builds the first steamship. At first, no one takes it seriously, but the English see its potential. Steamships are nothing like sailing vessels. They don't rely on the wind. They can move wherever they want, as fast as they want, on rivers, near coasts, anywhere. By the 1830s, the British Navy begins adopting steam power. Now they can control the oceans faster than ever before. And then come the railroads. The first public railway line in England. Then, railways spread across the world. In India, Africa, Canada, all built with British capital and engineering. These railways aren't just for transport. They're for strategy, to move soldiers, to bring in raw materials, to ship out finished goods. While you work in that factory, Raw cotton from colonies all over the world arrives in Lancashire. It's spun, woven, turned into fine fabric, and then sent back to those same colonies to be sold. India was once the world's leading textile producer, but the British deliberately destroyed Indian looms because India was to be a market, not a competitor. This is what they called the colonial economy. The colonies produce raw materials. England manufactures. The colonies buy the finished goods. And with every step, wealth flows back to England. Coal and iron. The heart of industrial power, you're on the night shift now. Standing beside the factory's massive steam engine, that roaring beast fed by coal. Tons of coal burned every single day. England is lucky. Beneath its soil lies a treasure trove of coal. Easy to reach, plentiful, cheap. That coal fuels the entire industrial system. And then there's iron. The mines of Wales and Yorkshire are full of it. Iron becomes steel. Steel becomes ships, trains, bridges, weapons. By the 1850s, England produces half of the world's iron. And with that iron, it builds the world. Indian railroads, canal ships, African bridges, all made from British steel and British engineering. You, as a worker, don't fully grasp it. But a machine part made in your factory is used in Africa. The ore mined there comes back to your factory. A vast loop, and at the center of it all, England. Year 1877, Queen Victoria receives a new title, Empress of India. A grand ceremony is held in Delhi. British flags, Hindu and Muslim princes, all swearing allegiance to Victoria. India has now become the most precious jewel in the crown of the empire. 300 million people. Immense wealth, strategic position. But how did it come to this? You are now a British soldier stationed in India in the 1850s, serving in the army of the East India Company, the Bengal Native Infantry. In fact, most of the troops are Indian, local soldiers known as sepoys. The officers, however, are British. Daily life is a strange mixture. In the barracks, you have Indian friends. You eat together, you train together, but there's a clear hierarchy. They can never become officers. High ranks are reserved only for the British. Then, one day, rumors begin to spread. New cartridges have been issued. They are said to be greased with pig and cow fat. Pork is forbidden to Muslims. Cows are sacred to Hindus, and you have to bite these cartridges open with your teeth. Rumor or truth? No one is sure. But anger grows. The 1857 Rebellion. A turning point, May 1857. It begins in Meerut. Sepoy soldiers revolt. They kill their officers. They march toward Delhi. There, they restore the last Mughal emperor to his throne. The rebellion spreads. Much of the Indian subcontinent is engulfed in flames. You are in a British garrison under siege at Cawnpore. Days go by. Food runs low. Water runs out. Outside, thousands of rebels surround you. Finally, a deal is made. Surrender, and you will not be harmed. You believe them. You step outside. And then the massacre begins. Women, children, the elderly, soldiers, hundreds are killed. When the news reaches London, the reaction is furious. Headlines scream Indian savagery. Calls for vengeance echo through Parliament. The British Army returns, stronger than ever, and their revenge is terrible. Villages are burned. Thousands of Indians executed without trial. Delhi is retaken. The rebellion crushed. But something changes. The East India Company is dissolved. Because clearly, a private company cannot govern an entire continent. From now on, India will be ruled directly by the British Crown. The Raj era, British India. After 1858, a new order begins. The British Raj. British administration. You are now a civil servant in this new system, a member of the Indian Civil Service, an elite institution. Entry is only by examination, but the exams are held in England, in English. So, in practice, nearly all of you are British. You work in your office in Delhi. Your duty to build the administrative structure. India is vast, hundreds of languages, dozens of religions, countless cultures, and yet, you try to govern it all under a single system. First, mapping. The Great Trigonometrical Survey. All of India is measured, square meter by square meter, from the Himalayas to the Indian Ocean. These maps are not just administrative, they are military, because whoever owns the map owns the land. Second, the legal system. British common law is brought to India. Courts are established. But here's the interesting part. Indian princely states are left autonomous in their internal affairs. The indirect rule strategy. So, yes, there are princes, but the real power lies with the British. Third, the railways. In 1850, India had no railroads. By 1900, there were 40,000 kilometers of track, the fourth largest railway network in the world. These railways united India, but also made it easier to exploit. As a civil servant, you are part of this system. During the day, you write reports, attend meetings, make decisions. In the evening, you go to your club for tea, a club only for the British. Indians, even wealthy princes, are not allowed in. This discrimination is built into the system itself, and you, in your own way, help normalize it. 1884, Berlin. The powerful nations of Europe gather at a conference. On the table lies a map, the map of Africa, and these powerful men are dividing the continent among themselves. Lines drawn with pens, borders measured with rulers. Not a single African is present at the table. This conference will be known as the Scramble for Africa, and Britain will be its greatest winner. Imagine you are a British colonial officer sent to Africa in the 1890s. Your ship arrives at Cape Town, South Africa, a strategic point, the key to the route toward the Indian Ocean. But there's a problem. Dutch settlers have been here before you. They're called Boers. They've built their own republics, the Transvaal and the Orange Free State. Then something is discovered. Gold. In Kimberley, diamonds. In Witwatersrand, gold. The richest deposits in the world. Now, The Boers are a problem because those riches lie beneath their land. The Boer Wars, a dirty war. The Second Boer War begins. The British Army attacks the two small Boer republics. You are a British infantryman, marching under the blazing African sun, through the dusty savannah. Heavy uniform, heavy gear, in the middle of a desert. The Boers are not professional soldiers. They are farmers, but excellent marksmen. They know the terrain. They use guerrilla tactics, ambushes, hit and run. At first, the British are stunned. A global empire, losing to farmers. But then, tactics change. And this new strategy is dark. Boer farms are burned, crops destroyed, families rounded up, sent to camps. They are called concentration camps. You are stationed at one of these camps. Standing guard! Inside, thousands of Boer women and children. The conditions are horrific. Little food, no hygiene. Disease spreads. 28,000 Boer civilians, mostly women and children, die in these camps, and 20,000 Africans as well, because they too are subjected to the same system. These camps are the first concentration camps in modern history, and they were invented by the British. In 1902, the Boers surrender. Britain wins, but the cost is immense, both in gold and in guilt. From Cape to Cairo, the dream of Cecil Rhodes. During this time, there is one man, Cecil Rhodes, diamond magnate, politician, visionary, or megalomaniac. Depending on whom you ask, Rhodes has a dream. A continuous line of British territory from Cape Town to Cairo, a north-south corridor, and along that entire line, the Union Jack flying. The map of Africa, he says, should be painted red with the color of Britain, and to achieve that, he will use any means necessary. Treaties, annexations, wars, Rhodesia, today's Zimbabwe, is named after him because he brought it under British control. You are a small cog in this vast expansion. You help build roads, lay telegraph lines, construct railways in Uganda, in Kenya, in what is now Tanzania. Everywhere the same story unfolds. Local kingdoms brought under British rule, by diplomacy or by force. And everywhere, the same system takes hold. Local land is seized and given to European settlers. The native population becomes laborers on their own land, working on plantations, in mines. At night, lying in your tent, you ask yourself, is this right? Is this just? But then you think, I'm only following orders. I'm just doing my duty. And that sentence is one of the most dangerous in all of history. 1914, June 28th, Sarajevo, a single assassination. The Archduke of Austria is killed a month later. Europe is at war. And soon after, the world, Britain, declares war on Germany. And at that moment, automatically, the entire empire is at war too. India, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, all of them. You are an Indian soldier, serving in the British Indian Army. You've been told that you are going to France to serve the King Emperor. You will fight the Germans. Your ship leaves from Bombay. Alongside you, thousands of Indian soldiers, most are from rural India, men who have never seen Europe. Many have never even seen the ocean. Until this journey began, you arrive in France.winter.cold. Your tropical uniform is no match for it. And then you are sent to the trenches, the westerns, front mud, barbed wire, artillery fire, hell itself, the armies of empire, the mobilization of millions during World War I. The British Empire mobilized 8.5 million soldiers. 5 million of them came from the colonies. India alone sent 1.5 million troops. Australians fought at Gallipoli, the Anzacs. Canadians. At Vimy Ridge. Africans in East Africa against German colonies. Indians in Mesopotamia, Palestine, and France. You, as that Indian soldier, are now at the Battle of the Somme, 1916, one of the bloodiest battles in human history. In a single day, 20,000 British soldiers are killed. You survive, but most of your friends do not. When the war ends in 1918, India has lost 74,000 men. But that's not just a number. Each death means a family, a village, a story. And when you return home, you expect to be treated as a hero. But no. The same discrimination continues. The same second-class treatment. This plants a deep resentment, a quiet unrest in the colonies. If we can fight and die for you, why can't we have equal rights? The empire has won the war, but cracks have begun to show. Versailles and the mandates. The empire expands. Further, the war ends. The Treaty of Versailles is signed. Germany is defeated. The Ottoman Empire collapses, and its territories, divided between Britain and France, Iraq, Jordan, Palestine, given to the British Mandate. On paper, these are temporary, to prepare them for independence. In reality, they are just new colonies. By 1920, the British Empire is at its peak. 1/4 of the world is under British control. 500 million people live under the British flag. Look at the map. The pink-colored regions stretch across every continent. Truly, the sun never sets on the British Empire. But this peak is also a turning point because controlling such a vast empire is becoming impossible and far too expensive. 1919, Amritsar, India, Jallianwala Bagh Garden, T. A peaceful gathering. Thousands of Indians have assembled to protest British rule. British General Dyer arrives with his troops. He surrounds the garden and then gives the order. Fire for 10 straight minutes. Continuous gunfire on unarmed civilians. No escape. Because the garden is walled in. 17 dead. 200 wounded. Those are the official numbers. The real number is likely much higher. This event shocks India. Trust in British rule is completely shattered. And one man turns this moment into a historic turning point. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Gandhi, nonviolent. Resistance. Gandhi is no ordinary man, a lawyer. He had already fought discrimination in South Africa under British rule. Now, he's back in India, but his method is different. No, violence. No weapons, only resistance, civil disobedience. Salt March. The British control the salt monopoly in India. Indians are not allowed to produce their own salt. Gandhi makes a decision. I will walk to the sea and make my own salt. And he walks 400 kilometers. Thousands join him. The entire world is watching. When he reaches the sea, he bends down and picks up a handful of salt. A simple act, but a defiant one. Symbolic, yet enormously powerful. The British arrest Gandhi. But that only makes him stronger. Because the world sees it, an elderly, peaceful man, imprisoned for making salt in his own country. You are a British officer stationed in India during this time, and you begin to notice something. Things are changing. People who once greeted you with respect now look at you coldly. Silent resistance. One morning, you go to your office. No Indian. Employees show up, a strike, a boycott. They no longer buy British goods. They no longer work in British institutions. Empire's control is slowly slipping away. World War II. Empire's final test. War again. Hitler invades. Poland, Britain declares war on Germany. And once again, the entire empire mobilizes. 5 million soldiers from India, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Africa, all joining in. But this time, things are different. The colonies begin to ask, why are we fighting your war? The Indian National Congress makes a demand. Give us independence, then we will fight. Britain refuses. Gandhi and the other leaders are imprisoned. But the war drains Britain, completely economically ruined. London is bombed. The army is exhausted. The losses are devastating. In 1945, the war ends. Britain is technically among the victors, but in reality, it's broken. It no longer has the power to sustain an empire. Independence, the end of an empire, a historic year. India gains independence, but in a bitter way. The country is divided, India and Pakistan. The partition leads to horrific violence. Millions are displaced, hundreds of thousands killed. Hindu-Muslim riots erupt. And as all this unfolds, the British leave 200 years of rule. Over 1948, Burma, 1957, Malaysia and Ghana. The 1960s, the rest of Africa. 61, South Africa leaves the Commonwealth, one by one. The colonies gain their independence. The pink map begins to fade. Hong Kong, Britain's last great colony, handed back to China. The empire has now become history. The empire is gone, but its legacy remains, and this legacy is far too complex to be described as simply good or bad. Let's take a calm and neutral look. Positive legacy. First, railways, roads, ports. The British built immense infrastructure throughout their colonies. India's railway network is still in use today. The ports in Africa. the roads in Kenya, all physical remnants of empire. Second, the legal system. British common law was adopted by much of the world. Independent courts, jury trials, the concept of the rule of law. These laid the foundation for democratic development. Third, language. English has become a global language. In India, people from different regions communicate with each other in English. In Africa, it serves as a common tongue. Trade, science, diplomacy, everywhere, English is the link. This is the linguistic legacy of the empire. Fourth, educational institutions. The British founded universities and schools around the world. The University of Delhi, the University of Cape Town, the University of Hong Kong. Today, these institutions are intellectual centers of their nations. Negative legacy. But there is another side. First, economic exploitation. In 1700, India was one of the richest countries in the world, accounting for 24% of global GDP. By the time the British left in 1947, that share had fallen to 4%. India's wealth had been systematically drained to Britain, a historic robbery. Second, artificial borders, especially in Africa. At the Berlin Conference, lines were drawn with rulers and pens, ethnic groups, family ties, languages. None were considered. Many of today's African conflicts stem directly from those artificial borders. Third, divide and rule. The British deliberately set groups against each other in their colonies. Hindu versus Muslim in India. Hutu versus Tutsi in Rwanda. These divisions still persist today. Fourth, cultural erosion. Local languages were suppressed. Indigenous cultures were labeled barbaric. In Australia, Aboriginal children were taken from their families and sent to boarding schools to be civilized. Similar policies were enacted in Canada and New Zealand. Cultural genocide. A complex reality. The truth is, the British Empire was neither entirely good nor entirely evil. It was a human-made system, and like all human systems, it contained both good and evil within it. Some British officials were genuinely well-intentioned. They worked to improve local living conditions, building schools, hospitals, and promoting fair administration. Others were ruthless, caring only for profit, viewing native populations as mere tools of production. The system contained both kinds, and today, people living in former colonies still feel this legacy. They speak English, yet carry colonial scars. They use British-built infrastructure for development, while remembering how it was built. History is not black and white. It is full of shades of gray. Now let's go back to the beginning of the story. The real question is, how did they do it? A small island, limited resources, hostile neighbors. So how did this island come to rule 1/4 of the world? The answer isn't in a single factor. It lies in the combination of many. Factor 1. Naval power and geographic position. Britain is an island. At first, this might seem like a weakness, but in reality, it was their greatest advantage, because no land army could ever invade them. Not even Napoleon could cross the English Channel. Not even Hitler. This security gave Britain a unique luxury. They didn't have to spend their money on a massive land army. They invested it in their navy. And for centuries, that investment continued. The result? After Trafalgar, no country could challenge the British Navy. For more than a century, they were the undisputed masters of the seas, and whoever controls the seas controls global trade. Whoever controls global trade controls wealth. Factor 2, the Industrial Revolution. Britain was the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution. Why? For several reasons. Coal and iron reserves, a stroke of geographic luck. Strong trade networks, they were already trading across the world. A powerful financial system. London became the world's financial capital. Capital, investment, banking, all centered there. A patent system. Inventors were protected, encouraging innovation. The result? In the 19th century, Britain became the workshop of the world. While others farmed, they built machines, and those who build machines build weapons, ships, railroads. Technological superiority turned into military and economic dominance. Factor 3. Pragmatic governance and indirect rule. The British didn't try to rule every colony directly. That would have been too expensive. Instead, they developed a clever system using local elites. In India, there were princes. The British didn't dethrone them. You rule your princely state, but foreign policy and the military are under our control. Problem solved. In Africa, tribal chiefs. Same idea. You stay the chief, but taxes go to us. This system allowed them to control vast territories with very few British officials. For example, in the 1930s, just 1,000 British administrators ruled over 400 million Indians. How? Through local rulers. Factor 4. The policy of divide and rule. The British didn't unite the people they governed. They divided them. In India, they fueled the Hindu-Muslim divide. When the two groups turned against each other, they couldn't unite against the British. In Kenya, they played different tribes against each other. In Malaysia, they gave economic privileges to the Chinese minority. The Malay majority grew resentful, while the Chinese supported the British. Not moral, but effective. Factor 5. Timing. The British appeared in the right place at the right time. The Indian subcontinent? They arrived as the Mughal Empire was collapsing. The central authority was weak, and they filled the void. China? The Qing dynasty was decaying. They won the Opium Wars. Africa? European technology far surpassed local powers. Machine guns and steamships rendered numerical superiority meaningless. Had they come 200 years earlier or 50 years later, their success wouldn't have been nearly as easy. Factor 6. Institutional structure. The British didn't just conquer, they built systems. In every colony, legal systems, police forces, tax collection, telegraphs, postal services, railways, banks. These institutions made control sustainable. And even after the colonies gained independence, many of these systems remained. Factor 7. Psychological dominance. The British conquered more than just lands. They conquered minds. The white man's burden. Propaganda. We're here to bring civilization, to educate you, to help you progress. This narrative was deeply internalized, both by the British and by many of the local elites. The result? Some local elites genuinely believed in the British system. They studied at Oxford and Cambridge. They adopted British values. They identified more with the British than with their own people. That is the greatest victory of any conqueror. To win not just with force, but by capturing the minds of the conquered. The empire is gone, but something remained. The Commonwealth of Nations, 56 countries, most of them former British colonies. They still come together. Meetings every 4 years, sharing values, trade, culture. But this isn't an empire. It's entirely voluntary. Any country can leave at any time. There's no central authority. So why does it exist? Why do these countries still want to stay connected to Britain? Because some things keep the ties strong. Language, legal systems, education, and trade networks. The Prime Minister of India studied at Cambridge. A Nigerian businessman founded his company in London. An Australian researcher works at Oxford. The empire may be gone, physically, but its networks endure. Modern Britain and the identity. Crisis today's Britain is a different country, no longer a superpower. After Brexit, it left the European Union. Scotland wants independence, and the British people face an identity crisis. Who are we? We're no longer an empire. We're not part of Europe anymore. So who are we? Some look back on the empire with nostalgia, the days of Great Britain. Others feel shame. Colonialism, slavery, exploitation. We must face our past, and this debate still continues. In 2020, after the George Floyd protests, the statue of Edward Colston was torn down in Bristol. Colston was a 17th-century slave trader. He used his fortune to help the city, built schools, hospitals. But that fortune came from slavery. He trafficked 84,000 Africans to the Americas. Thousands died along the way. When his statue fell, some people cheered. Finally, we're confronting historical truth. Others were furious. This is vandalism. History is being erased. And that is England's dilemma. How to come to terms with its past. Perspectives from former colonies in India. Opinions are divided. Some say, the British gave us railways, democracy, law. Others say, they exploited us for 200 years. Both perspectives exist. In Kenya, the trauma of British rule is still raw. During the Mau Mau uprising in the 1950s, it was brutally crushed. Concentration camps, torture. The British government only apologized and paid compensation in 2013. In Hong Kong, there's a strange phenomenon. Some people miss British rule compared to Chinese governance. They were more free back then, they say. Ironically, Hong Kong wasn't democratic under Britain either, but under China's authoritarian rule, the past seems more appealing. In the Caribbean, tourism markets itself through colonial heritage. Historic ports, old plantations, but the fact that those plantations were built on slavery often remains in the background. History is always interpreted by those who live in its shadow. Now, after this long journey, let's stop and reflect. What have we learned? Lesson 1. Power is temporary. The British Empire lasted 400 years. That seems long, but in the scale of history, it's a moment. The Roman Empire lasted 1,000 years, and it fell. The Mongols conquered the world and collapsed. The Ottomans ruled for 6 centuries and ended. No empire lasts forever, because power is dynamic. Today's superpower can become tomorrow's ordinary nation. If America is the world leader today, then Britain's story should serve as a lesson. Even at the height of power, decline can begin. Lesson 2. Technology is not destiny. The British gained enormous advantage from the Industrial Revolution, but it didn't last forever. By the late 19th century, Germany and the United States industrialized and soon surpassed Britain. Today, China is undergoing its own technological revolution. Artificial intelligence, 5G, electric vehicles. The West's technological dominance may not last. Technological advantage is temporary. It demands constant innovation to sustain. Lesson 3. Exploitation cannot last forever. The British Empire extracted wealth from its colonies for 2 centuries, but in the end, the system collapsed, because those who are exploited eventually resist. And in the modern world, legitimacy matters. "We are strong, you must obey," is no longer enough. Today's global economy still carries injustices: the rich North, the poor South. Multinational corporations hire cheap labor in developing countries. History shows such systems cannot endure. Sooner or later, there's always a reckoning. Lesson 4. Lack of cultural empathy leads to disaster. The British imposed their systems across colonies, ignoring local cultures, religions, and languages. The result? Artificial borders, ethnic conflicts, civil wars. Many of those problems still persist today. The lesson is simple. Trying to rule or fix people without understanding them breeds catastrophe. In today's world of migration and globalization, cultures mix more than ever. Empathy, the ability to truly understand others, has never been more crucial. Lesson 5. Economic dependence leads to political control. The East India Company began as a trading enterprise, but economic power became political power, and eventually it ruled a nation. Today, similar dynamics exist. Technology giants, Google, Amazon, Facebook, some argue they hold more power than governments. The concentration of economic power is dangerous for democracy. History proves it. Lesson 6. We must confront history for a long time. The British proudly told their imperial story. We brought civilization. But in recent years, they've begun facing the darker side too. Slavery, massacres, exploitation. These are real. And without acknowledging them, there can be no true reconciliation. Every nation has its own dark chapters. The Armenian issue in Turkey, Nanjing in Japan, Native Americans in the United States. Facing history is painful, but necessary. Because without healing the wounds of the past, no nation can look to the future with honesty or peace. And so, we've reached the end of this journey. We began on a small, rainy island in the 1500s. We witnessed Francis Drake's piracy. We saw the defeat of the Spanish Armada. We watched the rise of the East India Company. We witnessed the conquest of India, the partition of Africa, the world wars, and finally, we explored the empire's fall and its legacy. The British Empire was one of the greatest empires in human history. It controlled a quarter of the world. It ruled over 500 million people. And it shaped the world in ways we still feel today. But this empire was neither entirely noble nor entirely evil. It was built by people. And people are complex. Good and evil, courage and cruelty. Vision and blindness all lived side by side. Some Britons truly wanted to make the world a better place. They opened schools, built hospitals, fought against injustice. Others sought only wealth. They exploited, oppressed, destroyed. The system allowed both. Sometimes it even encouraged it. Today, that empire is gone. But its legacy remains. In the language we speak, in the institutions we use, in the borders on the world map, in international relations, and perhaps most importantly, in the lessons we can draw from its story. How is power used? How is technology directed? How do different cultures live together? How is the past remembered? These questions remain as relevant as ever, and the story of the British Empire offers rich ground for reflection. Now, the night has grown late. Your eyes are getting heavy. Your body has relaxed. It's time to let your mind drift into peace. Throughout this long historical journey, you have crossed seas. You have reached new continents. You have witnessed the rise and fall of empires. But now, all those stories slowly fade away. The ships return to their harbors. The flags are lowered. The voices fall silent. And what remains is only this: a deep, peaceful silence. Take a slow, gentle breath. Let every muscle in your body loosen, your shoulders, your neck, your face, everything soft and calm. History belongs to the past. Now, only the present moment exists, and this moment belongs to you, a moment for rest, renewal, and peace. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let go. Let all thoughts drift away. Let all worries dissolve. Let there be only this: a deep, tranquil sleep. And perhaps, in your dreams, you'll set sail across distant seas. Perhaps you'll reach undiscovered shores. Or maybe you'll simply anchor quietly in a peaceful harbor. Wherever you go, may it be safe and calm. Good night, traveler of history. Sleep well. When your night's journey ends, you'll awaken renewed and rested. But for now, just sleep. Sleep deep, deeply. And when morning comes, you'll remember all these stories as nothing more than a distant dream. Sweet dreams.